The 90s was a really cool and experimental time for Gibson. Even though I'm not much of a flying V guy, this one's always been my favorite. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, we've got another one of these, actually brought in for consignment from the guy who I purchased my other one from. This is the 1993 limited edition Cadillac Gold Flying V, and what makes this thing so fascinating to me is it blends the two main Flying Vs that were ever created, the 58 style and the 67 style. So 58s, we were just talking, really wide Carina body, chunky neck, big old gaudy Gibson logo on the headstock, string through with the bumper on the side, whereas the 67s get the slightly thinner body, are made of mahogany, sometimes even have the cool vibrola, and they make them a little bit thinner in this area. So why is this one so special? Is it borrows elements from all of them. It's primarily a 67 reissue styles body as far as your pickguard design, having a stop bar tailpiece, but look, it's got the rubber bumper. That's always been my favorite features of the 58s, so to have that on a 67 was always cool to me. And as I was showing you earlier, it's got the gaudy logo. Love it. It also has the claim to fame of slightly predating the 1994 Cadillac Gold Centennial collection. They had the pearloid pickguard with the exact same finish, but in my opinion, these things are way cooler. And one last hidden feature here are really nice ebony fretboards, which ironically you just don't find on any Flying V out of the 58-67 outside of limited editions. But the 90s was the birth of the ebony fretboard Les Paul Studio, so it's just the best of the 90s, the 50s, and the 60s. Sounds like we're talking about some kind of radio station. But no, we're talking about a guitar. However, for this updated review of this model, I have additional information from the guy who made these. He had sent me an email and left a comment on my video at almost the perfect time when John was dropping this off. He introduced himself as Michael, and he said he built all the bodies of this run on November 8th of 1993 on the old Gibson Extrom machine. It was his very first day as a machinist at Gibson, and he was just producing all these bodies off of the blueprints. He didn't know a lot about all the instruments. He was just learning that side of the business, but he had experience with CNC for over 16 years and was just finally applying that to guitars. However, around Thanksgiving time, all his other co-workers in that same division were sent up to Michigan to learn this new CNC machine from Como. However, his experience made it so he didn't have to do that. So he was left alone to make thousands and thousands of guitars apparently, but he finally remembers these golden Cadillac Vs because they were his first. He further went on to say that this is one of the last handmade guitars by Gibson USA, meaning that the old Extrom machine was so old that they made the bodies bigger so they could hand sand them down to size. So according to him, no two were 100% identical because of that, and that's something the new Como machine apparently fixed. So thank you, Michael, for sharing your story of these cool limited edition Vs. But speaking of limited edition, you might notice it actually says it right there on the truss rod cover. Limited editions were previously marked with a custom shop edition decal from approximately 1982 through 1994. I might be saying, hey Trogly, this one's a 93, why does it not have that? That's kind of that transitional era, because late 93 is when the custom shop officially opens. They move those very briefly into the custom shop like we talked about in this episode, but those were pretty well phased out by 94, and Gibson USA started to use these engraved truss rod covers. They look cool, but in my opinion they're terrible because they're so easy to fake. So never pay a premium for number one out of these, because yeah, there's no way to actually verify that. But they used these truss rod covers for a couple of years until about the mid-90s when they switched over into a new limited edition decal. And then from there, we stopped seeing limited editions get marked as such. We just started to call them cool different names like Voodoo Les Paul SG, and then we have a whole bunch of fun in the 2000s, but that's a story for another day. But John was telling me he had like 3 of these things at one point in time, but this was his last one. Well, let's go ahead and see what's going on with this one, because our pickup covers have been removed. Do we still have the original 490 series pickups? I guess we'll find out. Inside our golden V, what is the answer? Is it good or bad news? Well, for once, it's good news. Looking at the solder joints there, that looks fine to me, and we've got the Gibson USA base plates, but you can see where covers were soldered to these pickups at one point in time. So it appears somebody still left the original pickups in here. It was just a cosmetic choice to remove the gold because the black matches your fretboard, which matches your gold and black headstock. That's easy enough to restore on a guitar like this. But before we say for 100% certain, let's go ahead and check out our readings within the circuit. Yep, 786 in the bridge, 765 in the neck. That matches our last one. It should be the 490R 490T set in here, which is the same pickup set that you'll find in many of SG's. So another reason why somebody might have removed the covers was to make them just a little bit hotter, outside of just strictly cosmetics. Here's a cool thing about the Gibson USA base plate though. 93 is one of the earliest years of them using that. They just have now transitioned out of the patent number base plate. So even though that's what we've seen for decades now, this is like the launch of that. As far as the rest of our wiring, that all looks good. I cleaned that out during the live stream process of detailing this guitar. But this is before we switch into the Gibson branded pots. So we do have one visible code down here. It's slightly covered over by a wire, but you can just barely make out 1993 right there. Unfortunately, that's the only pot where any type of readable code is visible. But hey, one's better than none, and we can see our Switchcraft jack there. So pretty basic 67 style guard. But what is unique is this is an era where Gibson actually did use the shielding paint within the cavities. And the first time I documented one of these, I remember thinking, what is this? Is that a discoloration from the pick guard? After deep cleaning this one, I think it might be because of this process. It's a very dusty material that kind of flakes off, so I think it got coated on top of this, and then this discoloration might actually be from that. It could also be pick guard related. It's hard to say for 100% sure, but I can confirm that the two that I've had that exact same phenomenon. It's kind of a cool shadow, really. But if you wanted to buy one of these to modify, here's what you're working with. The large rectangular rounded off routes. Then you don't have too much additional room down here. And here's another data point for the early 90s. What do you guys think? Is this an original bridge? It reads, what? Made in Japan? That can't be right. No, it is. There was a small period in time when Gibson was probably using Godot parts, would be my guess. Whereas previously it would be made in Germany by Schaller. I was curious if these would be any more or less prone to warpage. Checking with our straight edge, we can definitely see this one's collapsed. Well, that's too small of a sample size to say is one better than the other. But for ultimate playability, you might consider swapping this out. Our tailpiece is also the original one. It's full weight and made in Germany, if you can see it, past all these shiny reflections that it now has. The plating's pretty worn right there. Somebody must have been resting their hand. This side, not quite as bad. But now moving on to our controls, it's a volume for your neck, volume for your bridge, and a master tone. And you see this? That's the original plastic over top of the pick guard still on underneath the knobs. Now, I would remove that, but unfortunately, there's no clearance between these knobs and the bottom, so it's kind of hard to get them off to remove that. And it's just kind of a fun throwback on a 1993 still having that. This is just our regular toggle switch, and you can see our golden nut has tarnished a bit. But I do believe we're outside of the era where the pickup covers have a more rounded over vintage look to them, so any modern golden pickup cover should fit these pickups just fine if you get your right spacing. If you decide you would like to purchase this consignment piece and want it back to the original look, like I wish I could. If I had the covers, trust me, I would throw them on right now. But the rest of this guitar just polished up beautifully. All those small little scratches and stuff, a lot of it disappeared. As far as what I noticed, if you get it in the light just right, you can see a small speckling of light dings in this area. But you do have an unfortunate finish chip right there on the edge. That's probably the worst thing condition-wise on this entire instrument, outside of some gold tarnishing and another one up there on the headstock that we'll talk about in a minute. And there is a small chip out of your fretboard right here. I might think, hey, how could somebody have been so careless? I have seen that in this era a few times. That might be another manufacturing process type thing, but it also does quite suspiciously look like a string got pushed into it. But I'd be willing to bet that was that way from the factory. Because here's another thing about this Flying V. You see these marks on the fretboard? That's just from the milling process of them creating this. My last Cadillac Gold V from this exact same run had this exact same phenomenon going on. It's kind of cool though. It looks like figured ebony, but it's not. But this board is so ridiculously smooth. It nearly feels like it has a gloss finish in and of itself. itself, it's a very oily ebony. And that was even before I cleaned and conditioned it, but now it's looking great. But I really love these small acrylic dot inlays. They look cool. Reminds me of the Studio Custom and Studio Standard series. That's pretty much the only time I like dot inlays. We can also see a manufacturing defect right here around this inlay. Looks like they had to do some wood filler or something. That will catch your eye when you get it in the light. And this guitar does have the whole fret sprout thing. Is it the worst I've ever felt? No, but it could be uncomfortable for some guys, so keep that in mind. You might want to have your luthier or tech help you with that situation. Or just wait for the summer months. We're really not that far, if we can believe the original owner as to when he played it. But I measure a 1.7 inch nut width. That increases to 2.05 at the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.81. Stays very consistent, only 0.87 by the 12th. So as compared to those other Vs we were doing, this one's a standard width, but basically your typical slim tapered neck profile, so it should be comfortable for anybody who likes that. Here's that neck profile at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. It doesn't look quite as slim as it feels, but you can definitely see the C-shaped neck and how it's nowhere near as thin as that true 67 reissue as we were just talking about. But man, that black and gold is decadent from this angle. That works really well. Perhaps what this guitar really needs is a Goldie in the neck and an uncovered bridge pickup to get the whole yin-yang situation going on. But here is our ever so glorious headstock with our plastic Gibson badge. The last one I documented, the logo was loose and I could actually take it out. This one is still perfectly glued into place and I tightened up those tuners and cleaned them. When you get it in the light, can you see some minor scratches? Sure, but I didn't see anything too over the top on the front anyway. Truss rod appears to be in good shape. And here's an up-close look at our limited edition truss rod cover. What's cool about this is it's historic style. So that means you have a raised ridge for the black area, and then it just goes completely into the white. It's not a sloping one like Gibson USA typically does. It's 2 different layers. Then I think that font is really cool. Limited edition, 9 of 50. I miss when Gibson would number things like that. It just makes it fun. The thrill of the chase for number 1, even if it easily can be faked on these. Moving on to the backside, it's a top-loaded guitar, so we don't have any routes back here, but during the live stream, we were talking about this golden color. How does it differ from a regular gold top? Cadillac gold, as compared to what we usually see, is just a little bit darker. However, just from this angle, you can see how it goes from dark to light. That just all depends on your lighting situation. It is a very attractive finish, but this one's looking glossy and shiny. However, it's not perfect. If you're really getting in its face and shining the light, you can see small specklings of light dings in the clear coat. I primarily noticed it like down here. You know, all the usual locations that V's get dinged up in. And you've got that typical neckline right there. It's not necessarily finished checking or damage. It just shows the seam line. And there's our cool rubber bumper there. Help you sit with it if you want to play it normal style. But everybody knows you play it classical style. That's the best way to go. But something I failed to mention about that ding earlier, it's a good way to know it's made out of mahogany, so it does serve a purpose as visual confirmation of that. But I like the strap button placement. One right here at the base of the neck, and then so you can stand it up just fine, they slightly offset it right there rather than putting it at the end. But as far as the condition of the neck, you can see a mild scratching right there, but that's just in the clear coat. I didn't notice it while playing this one. And as is typical, you do have a line following where the fretboard actually ends and the neck begins. The first one I documented, I would say it was actually worse than this. This one survived. But there must have been some humidity things with the woods that they were using to have both of these have expanding and contracting issues. We'll view the other side again. Thankfully, the side that you play and view all the time, that line is nowhere near as apparent. I found a new ding on the back while I was flipping it back over. Very small, but it is there in the clear coat. But now the back side of our headstock. Tuners are looking good again. Nice and polished up. Gibson Deluxe, double line, single ring. Serial dating it to 1993, 312th day of the year. Production number 731. Made in USA. But now we'll do a blacklight test to protect you as a buyer and me as a seller. Make sure this gets advertised properly. I do not see any major funny business going on the neck and the heel break area. But do we have any stand marks like on that other one? It looks like we're good. No clip-on tuner stuff. That reminds me, I forgot to show you guys the chip of the finish right up here at the top. That's tricky to show in blacklight due to the angling of it, but there it is without the shadows. Apparently there's 2 of them there. So man, we're 3 finished dings and 2 pickup covers away from this being a collector's dream. But I could still see a lot of collectors being okay with the condition of this one now that we've cleaned it up. And all strung back up now, it's playing great, and it weighs just a hair under 7 pounds at 6 and 15.7 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Last time we demoed one of these, I was running through my Fender Deluxe Reverb. It's a much different sound on the Marshall. I definitely like the way that this one is laid out a little bit better, because I remember the 490s just wasn't quite driving enough, but that bridge pickup's quite nice. Now let's try some dirt. I really like that. It's a little bit sludgy, but still clear. There we go, the 1993 Cadillac Gold Flying V. What are my final thoughts on this thing? Love it just as much as before. It's such a cool model. And in fact, there's actually an Explorer that's part of this series, but I don't want to spoil that until I find one because I've only ever seen one. So if you're lucky enough to own one of these, congratulations. Unfortunately, this little ding in our situation here prevents me from wanting to keep this one in my collection. But if I ever find a really clean one, yes, I will definitely hold on to one of these. It's just such a cool amalgamation of all the Flying V models. And their glossy ebony fretboards are just so cool. So if you're interested in being the next owner of this one, remember, it's in on consignment from John, and it'll be on my website as well as Reverb. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed, learned something new, and we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.